You ever get that weird feeling like something you've only seen in a movie is starting to happen in real life?
Oh, definitely. It's
Ah,
unsettling sometimes.
yeah. We've been digging into some really fascinating ideas about disaster movies and how they connect to, well, a lot more than just, popcorn flicks.
It's a connection that definitely deepens the more you look into it. It's not just escapism, is it? There's something like more resonant going on.
Exactly. So in this deep dive, we're looking at the surprising ways disaster movies reflect our society, maybe even tap into some of our hidden desires, and potentially even mirror the reality we're navigating right now.
Mm-hmm.
We've got some fascinating perspectives here, ranging from how art holds up a mirror to culture, all the way to social commentaries linking our movie taste to like bigger global events.
Right. We're basically trying to figure out why these stories grab us so much and, what those stories might be telling us about ourselves and the world.
And our goal for you, listening, is to give you a totally fresh lens to look at the films we watch and maybe even the headlines we read. We're hoping to offer some of those surprising, like, aha moments without it feeling like homework.
Yeah, keep it engaging.
Okay, so let's unpack this. One of the really intriguing concepts that kept popping up was this idea of mirror art. Could you shed some light on that?
Sure. So the material talks about a shift in contemporary art, maybe late 90s-ish, where artists started focusing on making what's called mirror art.
Okay.
The basic idea is simple. The art acts like a mirror, reflecting back society's values, anxieties, just the general state of things. Kind of like art saying, hey, look, this is us.
So less about the artist's own feelings and more about, like, holding a reflection for everyone.
Exactly. But then it got more complex. It moved into what's described as Hall of Mirrors art.
Hall of mirrors.
Okay.
Like at a fun house.
Sort of, yeah. Instead of one clear reflection, the image bounces between multiple mirrors. And what's interesting, or maybe a bit unsettling, is how this adds layers. The reflection gets distorted, complex, maybe even the sources used words like sinister or shadowy. It gives you the sense that things aren't straightforward,
A hall of mirrors. Yeah, that totally brings up that disorienting feeling, like reality's a bit slippery, makes you think of being in the Matrix or something,
Yeah.
which actually was mentioned, wasn't it?
It was. That's a key link. The sources suggest that feeling of being in the machine or questioning reality, like in the Matrix, fits right in with this Hall of Mirrors idea.
Ah, okay.
It shifts us from being like a detached viewer looking at a reflection to feeling like we're actually inside that complex, maybe weird reality.
Which then connects to that really powerful idea.
Yeah.
The feeling that we are in the disaster movie now, not just watching it from a safe distance, like, say, in the early 20th century.
Yeah.
It's a totally different experience.
Exactly. That sense of distance is gone. The anxieties, the potential crises that used to be safely on screen now feel much, much closer, more immediate. And it's worth remembering, this whole mirror art thing, reflecting society, it's not brand new.
The idea that maybe our constant diet of disaster movies over, 70 years might have actually helped create a desire for dystopia.
Yeah,
It's like mind-blowing.
it is a provocative thought, yeah. It ties into those ideas you hear in self-help circles, about the power of focus, manifesting things. The source material brings up this idea that, quote, we broadcast what we want to the universe, and it tends to give us back what we've been focusing on. The argument is that our collective obsession with disaster movies, this constant stream of destruction and crisis imagery, has sort of been a massive collective projection onto our shared screen of consciousness.
And the implication then is, by focusing so much on catastrophe, we might be, like, subconsciously making it seem more likely. Or even creating a kind of collective wish for that drama.
The source suggests that maybe on some level we don't fully process these movie disasters as real, because, we walk out of the theater.
Right, back to normal life.
But this constant exposure, this nonstop broadcasting of these narratives, it could be subtly shaping our collective expectations, what we think is possible or maybe even unavoidable.
It's hard not to see that connection when you look at the news these days. It really does feel like, as the source put it so well, a script for a disaster movie. You can almost pick a headline and see the disaster plot, can't you?
That feeling is definitely out there, the news mirroring these plots, and the sheer number of potential disaster scenarios just floating around in current events. It does lend some weight to this idea that we're so steeped in these stories, they feel almost, I don't know, pre-written.
Yeah, pre-written. Okay, now, a classic bit in nearly every disaster movie is the hero, right? Steps up, saves the day, some kind of order comes back. the happy ending.
Absolutely. A
Yeah.
core trope. And the source draws this really compelling parallel between that movie trope and the underlying hopes behind the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, the initial thinking was sort of, being the heroic force that brings about a positive resolution, a bit like the Allied victory in World War II, and then setting up a new global order based on Western ideas.
So these interventions were kind of like trying to write a real-world disaster movie script, aiming for that triumphant final scene.
That's the argument presented, yeah. There was this belief, maybe implicit, that Western democratic ideals would spread, be embraced, and lead to this new world order that looked a lot like those satisfying movie endings. The whole nation-building thing was, in a way, trying to produce that happy ending.
But as the source points out, that particular script isn't really playing out as planned, is it? We're seeing other big global players actively pushing back against that Western narrative and trying to write their own versions of a happy ending.
Exactly. The assumption that the Western hero story would just win out everywhere is being seriously challenged. Other nations, other cultures, they have their own ideas about a good future, and they're pushing back against what they see as, quote, Western cultural invasions.
So the idea of one single Hollywood-style happy ending for the whole world might just be outdated. Too simple.
It seems that way based on this perspective. Very contested territory now.
This brings up a really critical point, though, about how we engage with these disaster stories. Because watching one for fun, knowing it's fake, is worlds apart from actually dealing with the aftermath of a real disaster. The trauma is real.
Oh, absolutely. Huge difference. The source really emphasizes that contrast. Disaster movies are designed to trigger strong emotions, fear, excitement. But when you're supporting communities hit by real disasters, you need incredible empathy, sensitivity. The last thing you want to do is re-traumatize someone.
Right, absolutely. So if just showing disaster over and over can be harmful in that real-world context, what's the alternative? The source talks about this interesting idea, a disaster recovery movie. What would that even look like?
Well, the disaster recovery movie would flip the focus. Instead of the chaos, it would highlight the tropes and archetypes of, well, recovery.
Okay, so like resilience,
Yeah.
community.
Exactly. Resilience, community bonds, the whole process of rebuilding, and ultimately, hope. If you've actually lived through a disaster, you're probably going to connect more with a story about the tough but hopeful journey back from it, not just replaying the event itself.
That makes a lot of sense. And it's not just the plot, right? The source also mentioned sound and music playing a big part in that feeling of recovery.
That's right. The whole sonic atmosphere matters. Music that's like bright, uplifting, maybe in a major key with positive lyrics that can really boost that feeling of hope, of moving forward.
It's interesting, though, because it feels like a lot of contemporary art, as the source mentions, has leaned into that mirror idea, focusing on the triggering stuff, the raw, often negative emotions.
Yes, that's a definite trend. Creating art that hits you viscerally triggers strong reactions. Sometimes it's to make you think or maybe motivate action on tough issues. And in those cases, music often becomes secondary. It's more about the immediate gut punch of the words or images.
Hitting those emotional buttons. And this is contrasted with what the source called window art, which sounds like the opposite. Its goal is to show a path forward, a glimpse of a positive outcome.
Exactly. Window art, in this thinking, would be closer to those disaster recovery movies, offering hope, a belief in positive change through stories that focus on resolution, on rebuilding. But the source notes, feature films right now don't seem super motivated to make that kind of hopeful window art.
It almost feels like we're stuck in a loop, just constantly reflecting the problems, the crises, without really offering strong, popular stories about how we get through them, how we recover.
That's a fair takeaway.
Yeah.
And the source brings up songwriting as maybe a particularly cunning way to tell stories.
How so?
Because people often get hooked by the melody first, right? The
Right.
rhythm, the music, before they even really process the lyrics.
Oh, yeah, totally.
So it suggests music could be this subtle but powerful way to kind of embed narratives of hope and recovery, making them resonate widely.
Okay, so just to kind of wrap our heads around this, we've gone from art as a mirror to this more complex, maybe unsettling hall of mirrors, making us feel like we're in the disaster movie. We've touched on that wild idea that maybe loving these movies somehow shaped a desire for dystopia, and how the hero stories in them reflected these big global ambitions that are now kind of fraying.
Right.
And then that crucial difference between watching disaster and the real need for stories about recovery, about healing.
And underlying it all is this big question. How do the stories we consume actually shape how we see the world, and maybe even the future we imagine?
So the final thought to leave everyone with is, considering all this, how is our constant media diet, especially all the crisis stuff, subtly shaping how we see today and tomorrow?
Yeah.
And maybe more importantly, is there a way to consciously shift our focus in the stories we tell, the stories we consume, away from just the disaster reel and more towards that recovery narrative, both in art and, in real life?